Hello, my name is Noelle Wiggs, and today I will be discussing the issues and solutions of hosting the Olympics. Pierre de Coubertin, the founder and father of the modern Olympics, once said the most important thing about the Olympics is not winning, but taking part. The essential thing in life is not conquering, but fighting well. The modern Olympics have come a far way since their start in 1894. Since their founding, the viewership has grown into the billions, and nation participation has grown from 14 nations in 1896 to 206 in the 2016 Olympics. They are an internationally beloved event, and there is an unspoken issue about them that faces our modern world, and that is hosting a viable and ethical option? Hosting the Olympics since the 2000s has had price tags in the billions, has led to severe human rights violations, and have had negative impacts on the host city and nation alike. It is because of this that two permanent hosts must be chosen, one to host the winter and one to host the Summer Olympics, in order to prevent these issues. In order to fully discuss the solution to the full extent of the problem, we must look at the perspectives held by the cities that want to host the Games and the groups against hosting. In regards to those in favor of hosting the Olympics, primarily the host cities, the International Olympics Committee, primarily the host cities and the International Olympics Committee, there are a few key ideas in favor of hosting, and that is new jobs, large profit, and improved international image. The British Columbian government, the local government of Vancouver, Canada, where the 2010 Winter Olympics were hosted, projected that 220,000 jobs would be created because of hosting the Olympics, giving new opportunities to the unemployed citizens in the lower class and other disadvantaged communities. In Brazil, the International Olympic Committee reported a significant increase in tourism and tourism spending that year due to the Olympics, leading to a $6.2 billion industry because of tourism that year. This, compared to the estimated $2.8 billion cost of hosting the Olympics, would lead to, obviously, a significant profit. In addition to the economic benefits of hosting the Olympics can also improve an international image. Rio hosted the Olympics in hopes of improving Brazil's international image. Likewise, Beijing wanted to host the Olympics in order to improve their international image in regards to the environment. So they cleaned up their city successfully. They saw clear skies in the first time in decades. In addition, a historical example of this would be Barcelona. Barcelona went from a brackish backwater city to the tourism hub that we all know what it is today. This seems like it should be a done deal. But the benefits are not all as they seem. Bent Flavberg, I am so sorry that I mispronounced that, is an Oxford professor in economics, the director in the Oxford BT Center for Major Project Management, and the most cited scholar in the world on mega project planning and management. He is one of the most qualified people to speak on hosting the Olympics in the world. A study that he and others completed found that the average cost overrun of hosting the Olympics was 172%, with a 213% average overrun for the Summer Olympics and a 142% overrun for the Winter Olympics. In addition to the significant note of going billions of dollars over budget, the indirect costs associated with the Olympics can also add billions of dollars to the price tag, even though it may not be visible. For example, Andrew Zimbalist, a professor of economics at Smith College with a research focus and interest in mega events, especially the Olympics, found that Rio, in order to be seen as a more qualified city to host the Olympics by the International Olympic Committee, also had to host another mega event related to sporting. This led to them hosting the Pan Am American Games, costing Rio an additional $3.58 billion. Even ignoring the unrelated costs, the sheer cost of going over budget renders profits from tourism near useless. For example, that $6.2 billion tourist money in Brazil in 2016 was a mere 6.2% increase from the year previous. In other words, it was a mere increase of $350 million of tourist revenue. And what came from that is games that cost $13.1 billion, which ended up going, as you may notice, far over its original $2.8 billion cost. No modern Olympic Games has brought in profits since the 1984 LA Olympics, and they were only able to do this because they were able to reuse infrastructure from the previous games. So you may be thinking, well, this price tag may be worth some new infrastructure, but as you can see, it's not exactly as it always seems. 21 of the 22 sports facilities from the 2004 Athens Summer Olympics are abandoned. The aquatic center from Rio remains abandoned and filled with stagnant and mosquito-infested water. Even London has trouble filling up its stadiums, even using them to hold games with only hundreds in the stands built to hold thousands. Beyond the economic downfalls, there are also severe human costs to hosting as well. For example, in the 2008 Vancouver Winter Olympics, of the 2,200 jobs promised largely to disadvantaged and at-need communities, only 248 jobs were actually created, largely for middle and high-class workers. In addition to not giving the promised jobs, local governments were exceptionally cruel to the citizens it deemed unfit for the host city's image, largely the homeless, lower class, and minority communities. Jacqueline Kennelly, a published and cited scholar on sociology and anthropology, reports that Vancouver and London increased ways it was able to criminalize the homeless, letting authorities jail them in order to clean the streets and keep them out of the view of the Olympic audiences. Beijing forcefully evicted 1.5 million people to make way for the 2008 Olympics. Rio forcefully and violently evicted hundreds to make way for its Olympics. These are just some of the horrific instances of cruelty that Olympic cities show towards some of their people. These hosts can also abuse the games as propaganda, such as Berlin did in 1932, portraying Nazi Germany as a good thing, which it was far from. These are just some of the reasons that groups such as the No Boston Olympic movement have fought for not hosting the Olympics. However, there are some benefits that remain unchanged from hosting. National pride hits records when the Olympics are in session, as does international cooperation and participation in sporting. The question remains, however, if these benefits are worth the price. In a letter to his son, Theodore Roosevelt pushed for him to drop football, or at the very least not let it take over his life. He pushed for a balance between sport and the rest of life. And regarding to the dangers of football, he wrote, "I do not know if the risk is balanced by the reward," as he had a good reason to. At the time, football was far less regulated and far more dangerous than it is today. Even so, this philosophy of balancing the good and the bad can also be applied to the Olympics. There's an undeniable pull and magic about watching the best of the best do what others can't. Sport, particularly widely watched events, have a unique way of uniting a nation. In this time of divisiveness and unease, that is needed. It is the reward of the Olympics. However, it is not worth the current costs, economic or human, the cost. Right now, the cost is far greater than the payoff. But there is a way to solve it. Andrew Zimbalist, as previously mentioned, has spoken extensively about having a permanent host for the Olympics, one for each the Summer and Olympic Games. Not only would this get rid of the cycle of billions of dollars of debt, as he primarily argues, but it would also prevent some of the human costs as well. In conclusion, the Olympics do bring a uniting force and many benefits, but they are not worth the current cost. So you must find a permanent host for the Games in order to prevent all of these costs from continuing while keeping the fundamentals of the Games intact. After all, the most important thing about the Olympics is not winning, but taking part. Oh, also that last slide. And that, it seems I was behind. Slides are hard, apparently.
Do what?
Slides are hard, apparently.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, so a couple of questions. One, what evidence did you gather that you ultimately didn't use, and why didn't it make it into the presentation?
Yeah, so originally I found a lot of evidence following the No Boston Olympics Committee and other movements similarly inspired by it. It went into the specifics of timing, the really, really intimate details on why, but ultimately it didn't translate enough to an international thing to where it could be used well enough in a presentation about the Olympics as a whole rather than just the possibility of them holding in Boston. However, I do wish I could have mentioned more of the impact of that on the whole no hosting the Olympics movement.
And to progress with that then, if you had more time, where would you do additional research conducted to this?
Probably in that, because I would have loved to have more information on how that first movement and the No Boston. So there were other movements before the No Boston Olympics, but it was the first primary one, and it inspired a lot of other movements. There's currently one in Paris where I believe the 2024 Olympics are set to be held, and there's also one starting to gain traction in LA in light of the 2028 Olympics. So yeah.
Thank you.